All right, hello everybody out there. Great to be here at the Globe New England Boomers and Seniors Expo. I'm going to talk just for a little bit here about disease prevention with natural medicine. Director of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Dr. Neil Bernard, was recently quoted as saying that 2/3 of all Americans alive today will die of heart disease or cancer, mostly due to diet, and therefore preventable. In 1976, the McGovern Committee was America's first Senate subcommittee to hear testimony on health, diet, and human needs. The committee heard testimony from 1,100 experts from 8 different countries, concluding that 60% of the American diet was comprised of fat and sugar, and that 6 of the leading 10 causes of preventable death were directly related to diet. They further concluded that 30% of all cancer and heart disease-related deaths were preventable by diet alone. 30%. That's 250,000 Americans that are dying from heart disease and cancer combined that would be preventable through diet. Hippocrates once said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." I know a little about what Hippocrates spoke. Over the past 30 years, I've conducted over 60,000 health consultations that centered on food as a primary source of medicine. And during that time, there's been a great deal of research that has paralleled my particular subjective experience with food as medicine. The most compelling nutrition study to date is the ongoing China study. The China study was initiated in 1983 and co-authored by Dr. Colin T. Campbell of Cornell and Dr. Chen Junxi from the Academy of Preventive Medicine in Beijing. Here's some of what they found. 17 times the number of American men will die of heart disease than Chinese men. The average Chinese male has a blood cholesterol between 125 and 130. The average American male has a blood cholesterol between 210 and 220. 19 times more American men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer than Chinese men. Americans suffer 5 times more osteoporosis than the Chinese, despite the fact that there is little or no calcium in their diet. Americans consume significantly higher amounts of calcium-rich dairy products, yet have consistently higher rates of osteoporosis because of higher protein consumption. A person consuming 142 grams of protein will excrete twice as much calcium as a person consuming 47 grams of protein. In China, total fat consumption ranges between 6 and 24%. Here in the West, our total fat consumption averages up to 46%. So think about the average person in China consuming 6% fat in the diet, the average American 46% fat in the diet. In China, their protein consumption is 2/3 of our total, and only 10% of that total protein is from animal sources compared to our 70%. To summarize, to prevent disease, consume less animal protein, significantly reduce animal fats, including and exclude processed trans fats from the diet as well. Increase vegetable proteins, whole grain products, vegetables, fruits, and monounsaturated fats. In short, the way I like to put it is this: make sure you can eat your meals with your hands or with a plastic fork. If your food requires a steak knife, you're not preventing disease. I've always said that food is a drug because drugs can save life and drugs can take life away. If you really want to engage disease prevention with natural medicine, you must first digest the fact that food truly is medicine. The first medicinal nutritional agents discovered in the modern West were vitamins, derived from the 2 words vital amine, meaning amine of life. The word vitamin was first used in the early 1900s by Polish scientist Casimir Funk. In 1910, the very first vitamin discovered was vitamin B1. It was isolated then from rice bran. In 1913, vitamin A was discovered from cod liver oil. In 1920, vitamin C was discovered from citrus fruit, and vitamin D that same year was discovered from fish oils. During the 31-year period from 1910 to 1941, all the major vitamins were discovered. But the concept of eating specific foods to improve health was recognized long before the early 20th century. The ancient Egyptians fed liver to patients to cure their night blindness, which now, of course, we know is because night blindness is the result of vitamin A deficiency. Ginger has been used both as a food and a medicine in China for over 3,000 years. Both the ancient Greeks and Romans made medicinal uses of legumes and herbs. In 1749, Scottish surgeon James Lind discovered that citrus prevented scurvy, a deadly disease at that time due to collagen breakdown. In the late 18th century, European physicians used fish oil to cure rickets. In 1884, while stationed in Japan, the British Navy discovered that when staple rice diets added protein, fruits, and vegetables, they could cure beriberi disease. As we might assume from the noted Hippocrates quote, food has always been medicine. In fact, food was the first of all medicines. But foods of early times and their discovery for all-important vitamins during the 20th century were just the beginning. During the 1990s, nutritional research discovered what might be considered the ultimate medicinal supernutrient, the phytonutrient. Phytonutrients, or plant nutrients, like carotenoids and polyphenols, offer remarkable healing results. There are 7 health-preserving and health-altering properties of phytonutrients. Phytonutrients serve as antioxidants. They regulate cell-to-cell communication. They enhance immune response. They even alter estrogen metabolism, cause apoptosis, which, folks, means cancer cell death. There are foods and spices that kill cancer cells. We'll talk about that research. Also, phytonutrients repair DNA and detoxify carcinogens. In 2005, the USDA did an ORAC study determining what the highest antioxidant-rich foods were. They decided that there was a real important need for the American public to have an identification process. What are the most nutritious of all foods? What are the foods that are the highest in antioxidants? They found that of the top 10 antioxidant-rich foods, berries and beans occupied 8 of the top 10 spaces. Berries and beans. The government at that time established a relative score program. Any food that's 14,000, 15,000 was among the highest oxygen radical foods. Those foods that have antioxidant numbers in the 14,000s. Wild blueberries were number 2. Number 1 most high antioxidant food was red kidney beans. But again, 8 of the top 10 were beans and berries. Now keep in mind what I said a minute ago. The most antioxidant-rich foods scored in the 14,000 range. 14,000. Keep that in mind. They then studied spice, like cinnamon, turmeric, oregano, and they found that spices were 25 to 30 times higher in antioxidants than the highest foods. 270,000 points, 300,000 as compared to 14,000 for the highest foods. The saddest news of all is, if you think about 1/4 cup of blueberries equaling 14,000 antioxidant points, and just a little dab of cinnamon equaling another 200,000, you're talking about 250,000 antioxidant points, among the highest in spices and foods. Yet, the USDA found the average American doesn't get 1,000 points a day to prevent cancer, heart disease, to prevent free radical damage to the body. The USDA recommended a minimum of 3,000 antioxidant points a day. the average American doesn't get a single 1,000 because they're eating fast foods that are dead, they're eating meats that are highly processed, they're eating dairy products that are highly processed, none of which have any antioxidant values whatsoever. So once again, a quarter cup of blueberries and a dash of cinnamon gives you 250,000 antioxidant points. 250,000 points. The average American doesn't get 1,000 a day. It should be no surprise that we have the problems that we have. Again, back to Dr. Neil Bernard. 2/3 of all Americans alive today will die of heart disease or cancer, mostly due to diet, and therefore mostly preventable. Getting the information is half the battle. Appreciating it and embracing it and following it is the other half the battle. We said that also phytonutrients regulate cell-to-cell communication. What does that mean? You take 30,000 DNA hits every day. 30,000 hits at a DNA level every day by free radicals. It's a miracle what your body does to protect and defend you. Give it a little support. Just a little support. The objective is really to understand that these cells are communicating to each other. 70% of all disease is inflammatory. We used to think of inflammation as tennis elbow, arthritis, aches and pains in the joints. Inflammation accounts for 70% of all disease and 68% of all preventable death. Cancer is inflammatory. All cancers. Heart disease is inflammatory. All these diseases are inflammatory. And the cells communicate to each other in terms of whether they're being programmed to inflame or to anti-inflame. So if you're running into high risks, it's because you're producing a lot of inflammatory chemistry. And the only reason you produce inflammatory chemistry and put yourself at high risk is because, unbeknownst to you, you are programming your cells in cell-to-cell communication to inflame. Now, the average person, of course, would say, why would nature play such a cruel joke on us as to set us up for failure like that? Well, it doesn't. Nature is dual. It's yin and yang. It's all a matter of what you're telling your body to do. Your body will do what it's told, what it's programmed to do. When you think about inflammation, for somebody who is a hemophiliac, inflammation is a good thing. They don't have enough inflammation at a blood level to clot. So they need to eat more inflammatory foods to increase clotting factor. Most diseases, unfortunately, like I said, 3/4 of all diseases are inflammatory by nature. So when we eat something like soy, or something like fatty fish, or something like flax, or walnuts, or pumpkin seeds, when we eat fatty fish that's not farm-raised, it's wild, these are anti-inflammatory. They produce high levels of a fat called alpha-linolenic acid. Fats produce all hormones. Inflammation and anti-inflammation are all hormonal. It's purely a question of how you are programming your body hormonally to function. If you eat red meats, peanuts, dairy products, and egg yolks, you're programming your body to inflame. And I'm not just talking about tennis elbow, once again. There are 3 different categories of icosanoid hormone-like structures in the body. There are enzymes that are hormone-like that either are neutral, inflammatory, or anti-inflammatory. Now, most fruits and vegetables are at least neutral. They're not going to cause any harm. But once again, if you want to lower risk factors, it becomes really important to eat less meats. It becomes important to eat less dairy products. It becomes important. A lot of people say, well, without dairy, how do we get our calcium? Remember what we said a little while ago about that. One of the things the China study found is that there's 5 times the osteoporosis here than there is in China. And yet they have 1/8 the amount of calcium from dairy that we get. So we've been programmed to believe that the only way we can salvage our bones and prevent osteoporosis is a lot of calcium. Inaccurate. The single most important thing is to remember what we said about protein. Protein leaches out calcium from the bones. So if you're overeating protein, you're running yourself a risk of losing your precious calcium. Like we said a little while ago, it's really, really important to understand that a person listen to this closely, a person consuming 142 grams of protein will excrete twice as much calcium from the body, calcium loss from the bones, as a person consuming only 47 grams of protein a day. So the more protein you take in, especially if it's animal proteins, the more acidic those proteins are, the more calcium you're storing will be leached out. So the reason that the Chinese have a lower osteoporosis rate is because they have a significantly lower animal protein consumption rate. That's the takeaway. So it's really, really important to qualify your diet, to qualify your protein consumption, to make sure that you consider the prospect of vegetable proteins. Soy is a great vegetable protein. Of course, a lot of people get nervous about soy, especially because we've been told for years that soy could be a threat for many women who have run the risk of breast cancer. The newer information, there was a recent study of 18,000 women, a population study that found that there was 15% lower risk of breast cancer with the higher consumption of soy. The reason being, it's very simple. All the new studies are refuting and turning over the previous thought studies that soy was a risk factor for women with breast cancer risks. Inaccurate, untrue. There are two kinds of estrogen, 1.6 alpha-hydroxyestrone, 2.0 alpha-hydroxyestrone. Plant-based estrogens are 2.0 alpha-hydroxyestrones. They antagonize the animal-based 1.6 alpha-hydroxyestrone that we produce, that cows produce, that pigs produce, that hormone replacement therapy is taken from. So you cannot compare estrogens. They're not all alike. It's impossible to say that a plant estrogen is the same as an animal estrogen. First of all, animal estrogens are 2,000 times more concentrated than plant estrogens. Second of all, along with the indole-3 carbanols, like Brussels sprouts, mustard greens, cabbage, Chinese cabbage, these indole-3 carbonol-rich antioxidant foods antagonize. They have estrogens as well. So if you were going to make a logical decision to stop using soy products, you'd have to stop using mustard greens, spinach, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, Chinese cabbage. You'd have to stop eating half the greens on the planet. They all have plant-based estrogens. It's misinformation. The bottom line of it is soy is a very valuable and a very viable, low-fat, animal-free protein that lowers your risk factors for osteoporosis, for cancers, and for heart disease. We also have learned that apoptosis, or cancer cell death. Now think about those words that we just said. Cancer cell death. Apoptosis is triggered by things like ellagic acid. Now anytime you've eaten raspberries or strawberries and you have those little tiny seeds that get stuck in your teeth, those little berry seeds are loaded with ellagic acid. Ellagic acid is a polyphenol, like the French paradox, like French wine. Those little seeds are loaded with ellagic acid. Dr. Daniel Nixon from the University of South Carolina Medical School at the Hollings Cancer Research Institute has spent 9 years studying raspberries and cancer, and he found that the equivalent of 3/4 of a cup of raspberries, 3/4 of a cup of raspberries has enough ellagic acid from those seeds to cause cancer cell death in 48 hours. University of South Carolina Medical School, Dr. Daniel Nixon. Check it up. Dr. Gary Stoner from the Ohio State University has spent 20 years studying ellagic acid from berries. And in his 20 years of research, he's also found that, once again, berries have enough ellagic acid to cause G-arrest. G-arrest is shutting down the DNA mechanisms of cancer's replication in 72 hours. So the equivalent of 3/4 of a cup of berries has enough ellagic acid to make cancer's life very, very miserable. Food is medicine. It's purely a question of how you're using food, what your understandings of food are. Also, when we talk about things like bacteria, viruses, so many folks this time of year are so concerned about things like flu, influenza, and of course, the strains are mutating. They're getting far worse each and every year. Of course, you can kind of tell. But last year there was a strain of bacteria called the NDM1 bacteria. It killed over 3,000 people in the Middle East and Europe. And there was great fear that this mutated superbug was going to travel the planet and wipe the planet out. It's every year that this happens. There are these mutated strains of bacteria and viruses that the scientific community becomes very, very alerted to and very frightened by. So they tracked the NDM1 strain of bacteria last year, and they approached it with 15 different antibiotics. It was resistant to 15 strains of antibiotic. Within a matter of weeks, there was a study done at the University of Sydney in Australia. And at that University of Sydney in Australia study, they discovered that a wild bush honey called Manuka, M-A-N-U-K-A, Manuka honey, has 800 different methyl glyoxyl compounds in the honey. 800 methyl glyoxyl agents that strip the immunity of mutated bacteria. They applied it to the NDM1 strain and killed it instantly. Instantly. I did a radio program on that at WTKK last year. I did my Fox segment on it. And you couldn't buy Manuka honey last year for about 2 weeks. So get yourself some Manuka honey. It's delicious on top of it. But again, the research is there to prove it. Dr. Harry Preuss, P-R-E-U-S-S, Georgetown University, has done extensive study on the power of carvacrol. Carvacrol is the antibiotic agent that is natural occurring in oregano oil. He compared carvacrol and oregano oil to vancomycin, streptomycin, and penicillin against 3 different potent bacteria: E. coli, staph, and salmonella. And he found that in all 3 cases, the oregano oil was as effective as the vancomycin, streptomycin, and penicillin without side effects. A powerful, powerful natural antibiotic. In 1982, there was a remarkable, remarkable study. You know, every year it seems like one of the great fear agents that we become so worried about and so concerned about every winter isn't just flu, but rather bird flu. The media goes crazy. There's a frenzy about bird flu, bird flu, bird flu. There is panic in the streets. It's as if bird flu is going to take over the population. In 1982, Dr. John Kabara, K-A-B-A-R-A, and Dr. Daniel Heyerholzer were given a grant to study at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. And in 1982, at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, they both documented that a substance called lauric acid, a fatty acid from coconut, completely obliterated the bird flu. They recorded this information, and they basically logged their studies at the Center for Disease Control. We've had a cure at a government agency. It's been recorded. We've had a cure at the CDC for bird flu since 1982. If you're interested in using that to protect yourself, there is now a product called Monolaurin, M-O-N-O-L-A-U-R-I-N, or Lauricidin, L-A-U-R-I-C-I-D-I-N. So Monolaurin and Lauricidin are available at neighborhood health food stores. Generally speaking, you're talking about 600 milligrams. To treat a flu, you'd want to take 600 milligram capsules. You need at least 3 of those twice a day for a virulent strain of flu. They also found that monolaurin, or lauric acid from coconut, was antibacterial, antifungal, antiprotozoal. So it's a powerful, powerful protective agent that you should know about. When we talk about detoxification of carcinogens, one of the powerful agents that phytonutrients are capable of, there's another remarkable, remarkable series of studies that have been done in 2009. In 2009, Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia did some remarkable research on something called black cumin seed oil. Black cumin seed oil. Now, you know the spice cumin, that's exactly what we're talking about, but this is the Middle Eastern variety, and it's exceedingly higher in something called thymoquinones. Thymoquinones are among the most powerful aromatic antioxidants known to science. So at Jefferson Medical College in 2009, they decided to put black cumin seed oil to the test. They tested it against human pancreatic cancer cells, the most aggressive type of cancer that we know of, pancreatic cancer. And they found that within a period of 5 days, they were able to completely cripple pancreatic cancer cells with black cumin seed oil. Check that research out again. It's Jefferson Medical College. It's a remarkable, remarkable series of studies that they've done there. Food is medicine. You know, there are 250,000 varieties of plants on this planet. 250,000 medicinal plant varieties. We've only tapped 2% for natural medicine. 2% of the 250,000 varieties. We are at the genesis of natural medicine in this world. It's actually a very exciting time. There's a Dr. Avram, A-V-R-H-A-M, Dr. Avram Raz, who in 2005 did some remarkable studies at the Barbara Ann Karamanos Cancer Institute in Detroit. Dr. Raz found that one of the most damaging aspects to cancer was the aspect of how cancer spread through the body, the proliferation response, how cancer could spread. And he found in his research, Dr. Raz found that cancer attaches itself to what are called galactin-3 proteins, sugary proteins that stick to the cell walls, and that cancer needed to anchor itself in order to spread. So for cancer to metastasize, it requires sugar to attach itself to ground itself, to station itself, to anchor itself. The type of sugar is a sugary protein, as I said a moment ago, galactin-3 proteins. So what they found in this research was that a substance called modified citrus pectin, or what I refer to as vitamin P. How many people have heard of vitamin P? Nobody. All right, vitamin P is bioflavonoids. The part of the orange and the grapefruit that you throw away, the inner part, the white pulp, the white core that you take great pains to peel off your citrus, that's vitamin P. All vitamin P does is keep cancer from metastasizing. Stop peeling your oranges so expertly. Leave some of that white stuff on those oranges and grapefruits, and don't throw that pulp away. There's 1,000 milligrams of vitamin P there. So once again, the idea here is for cancer to proliferate, to metastasize and spread, it has to anchor itself with highly proteinated sugars, sugars that are combined with proteins. Modified citrus pectin completely abolishes this stuff. It washes it out of the body. It antagonizes it. So once again, food is a difference maker. This is a really interesting statement I'm about to make here, but this is remarkable based on research that to date, the phytonutrients that we just spoke about, represented by medicinal foods, plants, and spices, to date, again, we've only discovered 2% of 250,000 medicinal plant species, but to date, science has discovered that they have the ability to do the following: relieve pain, prevent and cure anemia, prevent fungal growth, prevent nausea and vomiting, lower cholesterol and triglycerides, prevent growth of bacteria and viruses, protect against genetic mutation, reduce pain threshold, inhibit oxidation, reduce and prevent fever, prevent and relieve cough, expel gas, soothe irritated tissue, promote sweating, soften and soothe skin, accelerate the rate of biochemical reactions in the body, promote estrogen, remove mucus, relieve cramping, lower pressure, relieve constipation, calm nerves, aid bladder function, promote saliva, restore body tone, soothe inflammation, and uplift mood. And that's only 2% of the 250,000 medicinal plant species that we've identified so far. We're moving into this realm of remarkable, remarkable science. So once again, since the beginning of time, our ancestors have been using spices, etc. They've been using legumes, they've been using foods of all types for purposes of healing and building up immunity. But we have the great distinction and advantage of being at a time in history where we're just about to explode with the remarkable possibilities. Again, I think one of the more important things to realize here is that each one of us has a natural organic chemistry inside of our body. The agents that we're talking about are representative of natural organic chemistries. And when we combine a lot of the chemistries of the fruits and vegetables and medicinal plants and spices, they're going to make contributions to our lack. We have lacks, we have deficiencies, and we're looking to replenish and replace a lot of those deficiencies. Just a couple notes I want to make here before I stop. Thousands of years ago, Chinese healers applied medicinal orange peels and hot wet cloths to breast and lymphatic tumors. Ancient Egyptian doctors administered grapefruit packs to inflamed joints to relieve pain. As we said, in the ancient times, there were remarkable medicines. And the sophistication of medicine has come a long way, and the sophistication of natural medicine is about to explode. As we said just a little while ago, it's really important to appreciate that we have availability to tap into some of these natural medicines right on the shelves of our health food stores, as well as our produce centers. The key here, one of the things I always like to bring up, is that organic makes a difference. A lot of folks have been asking the question, organic produce is expensive. I can't afford it. You can't afford not to anymore. 70% of the food in the shelves is genetically modified. 70%. Genetically modified. Now when you think about genetic modification, what if you're allergic to corn? What if you're allergic to peanuts? What if you're allergic to dairy or gluten? For all you know, the food you're eating that doesn't have any of those things on the label has a genetic crossover effect. In other words, if you, for example, are allergic to a given food, it may be in another food because it's been cross-geneticized. You're on your way to the ER because you're having anaphylaxis. Nobody's going to even know because there are no labeling laws as far as genetic modification. So if you're allergic to peanuts and you're eating a rice, because you're not allergic to rice, but that rice has a nutty flavor. And as part of the means of processing in that nutty flavor, they decided to use peanuts from a genetic cross-contamination perspective, cross-geneticizing perspective. You're eating something that you can't afford to eat, but you don't know it. It's not labeled. And when you get to the ER, they're not going to know it either. So my point is, organic has a time right now. It is time for organic now. I recently saw a study that I reported on New England Cable News, actually a couple years ago, that compared organic produce to non-organic produce. It was done at the University of California. And they established that organic produce, on an average, has 60% more antioxidants. And in some cases is as high as 98% higher in antioxidants than non-organic produce. 98%. So you're saving money on non-organic produce. You're getting empty food. Absolute empty food. Food is your medicine. Don't cut corners, buy organic. It's extremely, extremely important. I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple supplements here. 20 million Americans are presently taking aspirin to prevent heart attack and stroke. Now researchers have discovered that 1/5 the dose of a natural substance called pycnogenol may be as effective as aspirin for blood thinning. Noted University of California, Berkeley researcher Dr. Lester Packer recently performed a fascinating blood platelet study. The more concentrated the blood platelets, of course, the greater the risk of heart attack and stroke. Dr. Packer divided subjects into two groups. One group was given 100 milligrams of pycnogenol off of the shelves of the health food store. The other was given 500 milligrams of aspirin. Both groups then smoked one cigarette before and after having their blood drawn. The blood samples were then compared. Packer found no difference between the groups. Those who took 100 milligrams of pycnogenol exhibited the same blood thinning effect equal to those who took 500 milligrams of aspirin. Pycnogenol is an antioxidant described as 50 times stronger than vitamin E and 20 times stronger than vitamin C. It's a proanthocyanidin, not unlike grapeseed extract or OPC3, which a lot of folks know about. It's a member of the bioflavonoid family. It's a member of that orange pulp and grapefruit pulp family, the vitamin P family that we spoke of. The power of vitamin P. It's obtained from French pine bark, readily available at the health food store. And a recent study now done at the University of Arizona showed pycnogenol safely lowers blood pressure because it triggers nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. Pycnogenol. And again, I think one of the things to keep in mind here is it's a wonderful option considering that 6% of the American population is allergic to aspirin, so there is a viable natural option. Again, there are no side effects with pycnogenol known either. We talked about spices just a little while ago. And we're here at the Boomer Expo. There are spices that can help lower the risk and reverse Alzheimer plaques. I just did a study I just spoke on a study on Fox 25 this past Thursday. A recent Israeli study done at the University of Tel Aviv that found that there's an agent, an antioxidant agent inside of cinnamon, an antioxidant in cinnamon that in some cases actually delayed onset of Alzheimer's. In other cases, completely dissolved the Alzheimer plaques. Dissolved the plaques. That was done at the University of Tel Aviv in June of this past year. In December of 2004, researchers at UCLA discovered that curcumin in turmeric was able to break up human Alzheimer plaques implanted in mice. In a 2005 article published in the Journal of Cancer Research, researchers at MD Anderson Cancer Research Center in Houston, Texas, discovered that curcumin had the ability to stop the spread of human breast and colon cancer cells. That's curcumin, turmeric. How many folks have heard of celery seed extract? Celery seed extract. Celery seed extract has been used as a high blood pressure medicine for centuries by the Chinese. It has anti-angiotensin converting enzyme capacities. There are proteins in there that are ACE peptide antagonists that work to lower blood pressure by relaxing arterial walls and lowering fluid volume. It has a very powerful agent called 3NB. 3N as in Nancy, B as in Bob. And the 3NB has been shown to lower blood pressure by acting as a diuretic and a vasodilator. In other studies, University of Chicago researchers have discovered that it can successfully lower cholesterol as well. Rutgers University researchers have found that the acetylenics in celery seeds help prevent the formation of cancerous tumors in mice. In addition, celery seed extract has exhibited the ability to inhibit effects of liver cancer, stomach cancer, and staph bacteria. So you go to the health food store, you can buy celery seed extract in a liquid form. And again, look up the properties, check out the research, lowering blood pressure, antagonizing cholesterol, neutralizing certain cancer risks. And that's celery seed extract because of the 3NB. Powerful, powerful antioxidant. All right, there's only about 5 more minutes. I wanted to make sure I saved time for questions. Anybody have any questions about any natural medicine or nutrition questions at all? Yes? Yeah, what I said is that those folks who consume 142 grams of protein a day are at the risk of losing double the amount of calcium from their body, leaching from their body, as those consuming 42 or 47.
What does somebody got to eat in the course of a day to have 40 or 47?
Okay, just to give you an example, the average American consumes about 90 to 110 grams of protein a day, so we tend to be fairly protein-laden. And of course, nowadays the great concern is that a lot of folks are eating up to 150 and even 200 grams of protein. Bodybuilders, folks who are looking to really go on the Atkins-type program to really burn fat, and everybody's been programmed to think that burning fat is best facilitated by increasing a tremendous amount of protein. But again, this research from the China study basically indicates just the opposite. But to give you an example, a half a can of tuna fish is about 25. So there's your criteria. A serving of meats, lean meats, poultry, you're looking at 25 to 50 depending on the size of your serving. But you can see at 25 to 50 there, it's pretty easy between that and, you know, a yogurt snack or whatever and a glass of milk or two to be up around 90 grams a day pretty easily. But the Chinese, again, are consuming like half that. And again, most of their food is not animal-based protein, but plant-based protein, like from soy, obviously. And a lot of vegetables, fruits, and whole grain products. The thing that gets us into trouble isn't just the fat, it's where the fat comes from. It's the animal-based fat. Vegetable proteins and vegetable fats can't be compared to animal proteins and animal fats. Obviously, they're much more concentrated in their molecular density, they're much more acidic, and that's what runs us into trouble. So we want to lighten up our dietary load a little bit with protein and bring in a little bit more vegetable protein. Anybody else? Yes. Eggs? Is a question about it? Yeah, I mean, if you go back to what we talked about regarding the cell-to-cell communication, you know, where the body programs itself to anti-inflame or to inflame, and 70% of all disease is inflammatory, so this is pretty important stuff. Egg yolks are inflammatory. The egg whites are not. And you're starting to see now more omega-3 eggs. So a lot more eggs out there are being fed. You know, they're farm-raised. They're being properly fed, so to speak. In other words, when you feed anything, processed grains, for example, you're going to drive up the omega-6s. They're going to be more inflammatory. If you give it wild grasses, you're going to drive up the omega-3s and make it more anti-inflammatory. It's like if you take salmon, a good example is salmon. A lot of the wild salmon basically feeds off of plankton and a lot of omega-3 stuff. If you take a lot of the farm-raised, they're being fed grain pellets that are processed grain pellets, like corn pellets, which drive up the omega-6s and make it inflammatory. So one recent study that was done at the University of Alaska determined that farm-raised soy can be as high as 200 times more concentrated in fat, in bad fat, than salmon, than wild salmon can. So when you think about that, you might as well forget about the farm-raised salmon, order the prime rib. I mean, it's duplicitous, because why do people eat salmon? Because you're trying to lower your risk of heart disease, you're trying to anti-inflame, you're trying to take care of yourself, support your immune system, etc. You're not going to get that if you're eating farm-raised fish. It's duplicitous. So we need to be better about labeling, about informing, and you as a consumer public need to ask more questions. Wherever you are, demand a higher quality of food, and you'll start to see it. But eggs, I'd stay with whites, avoid the yolks. Yes?
I was wondering on the protein intake, an athlete in a workout program to become stronger, if he utilizes his protein to build tissue, in other words, is there a difference between taking in protein and not utilizing?
All right, it's a great question. His question is, what about an athlete that takes in a lot of protein? They're sort of metabolically geared to make better use of all that protein to build muscle. Yes and no. You know, the mechanisms, it's kind of like saying that we could put a bodybuilder up here and put somebody next to them who's not a bodybuilder, and we could clearly see the distinction between body A and body B. That's only on the outside. The internal biochemistry isn't that dramatically different. Now, it's true that the body adapts, so that the high-protein bodybuilder is going to adapt a greater potential to make use of those proteins than the person who's not. But you're still going to have these limitations that ultimately are staring back at you, that in the final analysis are going to create problems with nitrogen deamination, overworking the kidneys, and losing bone mass. And you know, over the 30 years that I've been doing what I've been doing, I've seen 60,000 appointments, and I've seen a lot of athletes, a lot of bodybuilders coming in to see me who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s, who are broken down, who have osteoporosis, etc. So it's not a natural way to go.
It's not like work out more and you're okay.
Exactly. It's not like work out more and you're going to compensate. Okay, we'll take another question. Anybody else? Yes. You asked about osteoporosis. What about it, though? Oh, the best way to deal with osteoporosis. Okay. Well, first things first. When we talk about osteoporosis, we go back to the very first thing we talked about, which is that the China study kind of proves that with osteoporosis being significantly lower in China, in spite of the fact that they have significantly lower levels of dairy and calcium, there's something fishy there. We've been told that calcium is going to build our bones, and I believe we've been sold a bill of goods there. Calcium in our world comes from dairy, and dairy in our world comes from cows, and cows in our world are animals. Animal proteins are the key to the China study. The more vegetable protein, the less animal protein, the better off you are. That's number one. Number two, as far as osteoporosis, the key to that is their bodies and their chemistries in China are much more alkaline. You know, there's going to be significantly less acidification, if you will. Acid is corrosive. The more acidic animal proteins, even if it's dairy products, they're still animal proteins. They're still acidic. And acid corrodes, and it leaches. And like we said, high protein, like we just talked about with this gentleman over here, high protein is going to leach a higher amount of calcium out of the body than lower amounts of protein, especially, again, animal-based versus vegetable-based. So number one, I'd say, start fooling around with a little bit of soy protein. Try to experiment with it. Number two, a lot of green vegetables, because green vegetables are loaded with calcium, not to mention the fact that they are alkaline, they're high in enzymes, and they're rich in magnesium as well. So when something just has calcium, it doesn't really hold water. It's got to have calcium that's absorbable. It's got to be alkaline, not acid, because it doesn't want to be corrosive. It wants to have enzymes, because enzymes are necessary to facilitate the gobbling up and the absorption of that calcium. And it has to have magnesium to assist it in its absorption. In terms of a product that I would recommend, I would tell you that there's a product by Garden of Life. Garden of Life product is called Grow Bone. It's a Grow Bone system. It has vitamin MK7, which is menaquinone. Menaquinone is a very important vitamin K2. It's not the vitamin K2 that clots your blood. It's the vitamin K2 that is a traffic cop to all calcium. It makes sure calcium goes to the bones and it doesn't collect, clotting up your arteries. So it has all that in there. So I'd say to take the Garden of Life Grow Bone system. It's a very, very good system. And I don't get paid by Garden of Life, just so you know that. But the CEO of the company came on my radio show one night, and he said, I will put out a guarantee. He said, if folks get a bone scan, save the cost of the bone scan, save the receipt, buy 6 months worth of Grow Bone, get another follow-up bone scan in 6 months, save that receipt, and if they can prove that on my product they didn't grow bone, we'll pay for 6 months worth of product and both bone scans. And I put about 300 people through that, and every one of them have grown bone. So I can tell you he's got a good product. He did his homework, and he deserves the kudos. So hats off to him for doing a good job. And if he could kick me back $1 or $2, I'd be thrilled. Yeah.
So if soy is a good alternative, but we're trying to avoid animal proteins, is whey a bad alternative?
The question was, if soy is a good protein, and generally speaking, too much animal protein is a bad thing, is whey, W-H-E-Y, a bad alternative? No, I think that whey can be all right. I guess, number one, you want to make sure, you want to determine whether or not you have a sensitivity to dairy. If you're allergic to dairy or don't know, I wouldn't even race ahead if you don't know. I want to make sure.
Allergic to soy.
You're allergic to soy, yeah, then you probably have to stick with the whey. If you're sure that you're not allergic to dairy, of course. The dairy sugar, the lactose, the dairy protein is the casein. If you're sensitive to either one of those, you've got to be careful. But there's so many other proteins out there right now. There's a number of different vegetable proteins that are made of pea, like PEA, peas, that are isolated pea proteins. There are isolated rice proteins nowadays. So there's never been so many viable alternatives to good protein powders. I would tell you that if you can get a hold of Metagenics, which is usually dispensed only through professionals, chiropractors, nutritionists, doctors, etc. But Metagenics makes an Ultra Clear Plus. It's about as good a protein powder as there is on the planet. It's called a medical food. When it's really well constructed, it's no longer called a protein powder or a supplement. It's considered a medical food. And it surely is a very good medical food. So if you can locate that, I think you're doing fine. All right, last but not least, I have a new book coming out. This is the shameless plug section of the presentation. It's called Customized Healing, and it's by yours truly. And that book is coming out in December, so it can be ordered in advance off of Amazon.com if you're interested in doing so. If not, you wait till December; it'll be out there. Also, I have a radio show at 5 o'clock. I'll be heading over to the studio. It's 96.9 FM WTKK, Natural Health Show. And I also do a Fox television segment every other week on Fox 25, and it's called Living Well. It's on 8:50 in the morning every other Thursday. I will not be on this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday, so every other Thursday for the segment. And if you want to catch all that stuff and all the archives of all the shows I've ever done, you can go to my website, one-stop shopping at maxhealing.com. One word, maxhealing.com. And I thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Thanks. And thank you to the Globe as well.